How you feeling? You all right?
I was at Wilshire last week.
Yeah.
Last 2 weeks.
How's Stevie?
I didn't know he just raised $30 million. I guess.
Hey, what?
He just raised $30 million for.
All right. Let me see how much of this we can. A little bit. I want to talk about truth. I think it's on now. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Shabbat shalom. Welcome back. It's certainly good to see everyone. Shabbat shalom. David, you want to come join? It's lots of room. Good morning. Shabbat shalom. Welcome back. Nice to see everybody. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Good to see everyone. This morning, after our Torah study, you're invited to come and pray together. Rabbi, you're back. Welcome back. It's an honor to have you here. Welcome. I hope you're feeling well. Good. And Rabbi Gelman's back. Rabbi Gelman.
What? Oh, and also Gelman.
He was in hospital. He was hurt.
Okay, I didn't.
You were at Wilshire.
Okay, my son's not a star. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Rabbi Mark Gelman. Anav mikol ish. You know, that's the...
I have never seen you suck up like that.
It's an old friend, and he was in the hospital for 3 weeks. Come on. Oh, Sherry's back, too. Come on in. Oh, you just missed Rabbi Gilman's show. You just... the first episode. Mickey, you got a place? You have a place to sit? Do we have a place for Mickey?
Another rabbi.
No, come in. Sherry's here, Mickey's here. So make room. Somebody make room for Mickey. Is there room over here? I'm here. Okay, so if you guys will just move over and make a little room. I'll make sure everyone has room. We are building a bigger chapel. If anyone has $20 million and would like to see it, I'll be 9. Yeah, that's all it is. I'll name it for you. Okay. Following our Torah study, there's prayers, and then following that, of course, there's lunch, and then Parsha group this morning. Good. This week we had all the graduations in schools, so to everyone who has a graduate, who is a graduate, congratulations and mazel tov, and I hope it's the beginning of a new moment in the lives of your families. We're going to be continuing Torah study through the end of July. okay, because I'm not leaving until the end of July. So the only exception is the very last week in July, which is July 28th. There will not be Torah study, but through the month of July we'll be together. We'll get to go through a large piece of the book of Numbers and Deuteronomy together. Now I'm going to say my bracha and turn on the air conditioning. Shechianu v'kiyamanu. $1 million building, $20 air conditioning. Okay, there we go. Is it on? No, yeah, actually you don't. There it goes. Okay. Now, this morning we are in the middle of the book of Bamidbar. We're going to use both the Shina and the Torah. So if you have each, if you don't have the Torah, share one. We're not going to do too much, but I want to, you can set the scene for you. So, page 860. Yeah. Parashat Korach, which is page 860, the 16th chapter of the book of Numbers, Numbers 16. Okay? Did I do that right? Thanks, Bob. Okay. Last week, you remember, we sent 12 spies into the land. 10 came back with a negative report, a discouraging report that people rebelled against Moses, and they were condemned to wander the desert for 40 years until a new generation rose up. This is now the natural response to that. Korach, son of Yitzhar, son of Kohat, son of Levi. The Hebrew is vikach, which means he took. The translator here has twisted that just a little bit and said, took himself. And that's one of the questions of the tradition is, what did he take? He took himself, or took Datan and Aviram, sons of Eliabenom, sons of Pelach, descendants of Reuben, to rise up against Moshe. This is the Great Rebellion. This is the Great Rebellion. The Great Rebellion is, having been told now they're condemned to wander the desert, there is a popular revolt against Moses. Actually, as you read the Parsha, you're going to read three different revolts. There's three different revolts going on, and what the Parsha has done, what the Torah has done, is conflate the three into one. There's Korach, who is Moses' first cousin, who actually has better yichus than he does because his father is older than Moses' father. Okay? Same family. His father is Moses' younger brother. His father is Moses' older brother, father's older brother. So Korach stands up against Moses. Datan and Aviram are the leaders of the tribe of Reuven and 250 tribal elders, and the Levites, who is Moses' tribe, rise up. The Levites are actually rising up against Aaron. They would like to take the prerogative to offer sacrifices. The elders stand up against Moses because they're the tribal elders, and who are you to lead us? Sort of a popular states' rights, we would call that in America, revolt. And Korach is the principal spokesman because he's the voice of this, okay? To rise up against Moses together with 250 Israelites, chieftains of the community. Do you see where we are? Chosen of the assembly, men of repute. They combined against Moses and said, Rav lachem, you've gone too far. You've taken upon yourself authority that you don't deserve. The question of the Torah portion, this is going to be a blatantly political question today, is who rules? Who has legitimate authority? Who has the right to say, I'm in charge? Who rules? Okay? Now, in America, we have a sense of this because we've inherited an English liberal tradition which said those who govern by the consent of the governed. We appoint officials by electing officials. We elect. We designate someone, we vote for them, the majority rules, that person gets to be the elect, and that person gets to make the rules and the laws. That's one model of authority, of legitimate authority, okay? But there are other models of legitimate authority, other models where people accumulate to themselves the power to rule, and that's going to be the question today. You've gone too far, and now here's Korach's claim, right? Ki kol ha'edah kulam kedoshim. All of the community is kedoshim. Everyone's holy. If everyone's holy, who the hell are you? If everyone is godly, who are you? What right do you have to accumulate? Because Moses' claim, of course, is that he was chosen by God. He didn't want this job. He wanted to rule over sheep, which are much easier to rule than Jews. This I will tell you for sure. And he gave that up because he was called out of retirement by God. He rules by the grace of God, which is a different model. It's a different model than we're used to, right? So the Korach comes up and he says something very interesting, right? He says, Kol Eida Kedoshim, everybody's holy. What makes you holier than us? What makes the Levites holier than any other tribe? Why do we need a leader altogether if we're all holy, right? If we're all somehow attached to God, right? Why do you raise yourselves above the Lord's congregation? What gives you the right? Who died and made you king, right? Now, you might remember that question, by the way, just incidentally, because we've heard that question before, right? If you remember it, you can turn the page if you want, but you don't have to. On Moses' very first day in the world, when he leaves the palace, early in the story. Remember, I'll read it to you so that you don't have to turn any pages, right? Right? Early, right? Sometime after that, it's Exodus 2:11. Sometime, it's on page 324, but don't turn the page. When Moses is grown up, he went out and he sees a slave master beating the life out of a slave, and he saves the guy's life. You remember the story? It says, the second day he went out, and he found two Hebrews fighting. Imagine that. And he said to the offender, why do you strike your fellow? And he retorted, who made you chief and ruler over us? Who made you chief and ruler over us? Which is ironic because the guy who's speaking is a slave and the guy who's asking him is the prince of Egypt, like he really is, right? But that question of what gives you the right to rule? What's more than what's it to you? It's why do you think you're above me? That's going to be a retort that's going to echo through Jewish history. We have a very hard time with authority.
But the slave has chutzpah.
It's more than chutzpah. You're right. Of course you're right. But it's more than chutzpah. It's a sense in which we have, maybe it's because we were escaped from Pharaoh's tyranny, or maybe it's just in our blood in some fashion, but we have this terrible suspicion of anybody who sort of rises above us, right? There's always this tendency to say, who does he think he is? Right? Did anyone here ever...
Based on experience, it becomes well-founded in life.
Well...
Your experiences support that suspicion.
Well, if you have that suspicion, then you can find those experiences, right? I don't know if any of you have ever been a synagogue president, but it's a really interesting job. It's a really interesting job. So let's go back to Korach. Moses heard this, he fell on his face. But Moses typically can't deal with confrontation. This has been his problem. So he freezes, or he falls, right? He spoke to Korach and said, come morning, the Lord will make known who is his and who is holy, and who will grant him access to himself. He will grant access to the one he has chosen. And then he gives Korach and the Levites, so this is the Levite rebellion. You, Korach, and all your band, take fire pans, that's part of the sacrificial worship, and put fire in them and lay incense before the Lord, and the man whom the Lord chooses, that'll be the guy who will lead. So he's dealing with the Levite rebellion here, right? And then he says further, hear me, sons of Levi, is it not enough for you that God has set you apart from the community of Israel, given you access to him to perform the duties of the Lord's tabernacle and the minister to the community and serve them? Now he has advanced you and all your fellow Levites. Do you seek the priesthood too? I mean, he really is, the Levites are part of the rebellion, okay? And then he says to Natan and Abiram and the chieftains, and he's going to deal with each one of these rebellions. And I'll give you the end of the story because I want to look at the whole thing as a piece, right? So they take the fire pans and look at page 863, verse 23, 1623 at the bottom. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the community, say, withdraw from the abodes of Korach, Datan, and Abiram. So Moses went to Datan and Abiram. The elders followed him, and he addressed the community, move away from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing that belongs to them. Right? Datan and Abiram had come out at the entrance of their tents, and Moses said, by this you will know it was the Lord who sent me to do all these things, that they are not of my own devising. If these men die as men do, if their lot be the common fate of all mankind, it was not the Lord who sent me. But if the Lord brings about something unheard of, so for example, the ground open its mouth and swallow them up with all that belongs to them, and they go alive to Sheol, they all get sucked into hell, you shall know that these men have spurned the Lord. Scarcely has he finished speaking all these words when the ground under them burst asunder. I love this. Could you tell that I love this? This is every leader's fantasy. How many board meetings did you sit at? How many board meetings, Rabbi, did you sit at and say, if these men die in the normal way and we bury them at Mount Sinai Memorial Park, you'll know that I'm ashore. But if the earth opens, and the earth opened up and swallowed them, this is every rabbi's dream. This is every leader's dream, right? I mean, sometimes when you listen to our president and he's talking about CNN, you're like, the earth should open up and swallow all of CNN. Don't you have that? This is a leader's dream. Any opposition should be swallowed up, right? Scarcely had he finished speaking these words when the ground under them burst asunder. The earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up in their household. All Korach's people and their possessions, they went down alive into Sheol. Sheol is death. With all their possessions to them, the earth closed over them. They vanished from the midst of the congregation. And Israel around them fled with shrieks. For they said, the earth might swallow us. And a fire went forth and consumed 250 men offering incense. Now, don't mess with me. All right, so you see the end. All right, so there's 3 rebellions. The fire comes from the tabernacle and destroys the Levites who were challenging Aaron. The earth opens up and swallows Korach and the chieftains who had challenged Moses. And order and legitimacy is restored. End of story. Interesting. Now, so what gives Moses power? What gives Moses authority, not power? What gives him authority? God has chosen him. How do you know? So now this is a model. You see the model of authority here? And you also have a model of dissent. If God has chosen him, there's no room for dissent. There's no room for conversation. You can come and ask him a question, and people do. You see that in the Torah all over the place, where something's happening and they come to us and say, what do we do? Later on, there's going to be a story about 5 women whose father has died, and the question is, do they inherit? This is in the Slavchad, right? So they're going to ask questions, but you can't go and challenge his authority. Why not? Because God backs him up. That's one model of authority. That's one model of community. Now, it's hard to evoke that in the world because it's very hard to know. I mean, did Moses know the ground was going to open up? He calls it, bam, it happens. That's amazing. If you can't do that, it makes it very hard. Even the Torah starts to say, is that really the basis of authority? Is the basis of authority really that God chose this leader? Right. Well, here's the question. What happens if a guy shows up and says, God's chosen me, and you don't know if God's really chosen him? What happens if somebody shows up and says, I speak in the name of the Lord? Let's just take a quick look around the Torah, and then we're going to take a look at some extra biblical sources. So take a look with me, if you could, please, to Deuteronomy chapter 18. I'm going to tell you in just a second. 1096, page 1096. Okay? 1096. Okay? It's 1815. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet from among your own people like myself. This is Moses now talking to the next generation as they're about to enter the land. Like myself, and you shall heed. Him you shall heed. You'll listen to. When a prophet comes in, you'll heed him. You'll listen to him, right? This is just what you asked the Lord your God at Horeb on the day of the assembly, saying, let me not hear the voice of the Lord my God any longer, or see this wondrous fire, lest I die. When we were at Mount Sinai, we said to Moses, it's too scary, you go talk to God. So Moses is going to say, yeah, and that's how God's going to communicate with you. From now on, when God wants to communicate, he'll send prophets. Okay? He'll send prophets. Whereupon the Lord said to me, they have done well in speaking. I will raise up a prophet for them from among their own people like yourself. I'll put my words in his mouth, and he will speak to them as I command. And if anybody fails to heed his word in my name, I myself will call him to account. But, here it comes. Ready? Any prophet who presumes to speak in my name an oracle that I did not command him to utter, or who speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet shall die. All right? So if a prophet shows up and he says something that God didn't tell him to do, that prophet's going to die. And then the Torah is very shrewd. Listen what happens next, 1097, top of the page. But if you should ask yourselves, how can we know? How do we know if this is a true prophet or a false prophet? I mean, I don't know if you know this, but there are a lot of people walking the streets of LA who claim to speak in the name of the Lord, right? If you've ever been to Jerusalem, right, I've met Jesus Christ 100 times in Jerusalem. No, there's the thing called Jerusalem syndrome. There really is. And there's an insane asylum in Jerusalem full of people who will tell you with a straight face, they are Jesus Christ. You get to Israel and you turned into, and there are people walking the city of LA who will tell you, right? How do you know? How do you know the difference between prophecy and insanity? How do you know that a person isn't just making this up? Or prophecy and megalomania, right? The person who says, I want to rule. How do you know? Right? If the prophet speaks in the name of the Lord and the oracle does not come true, that oracle was not spoken by the Lord. The prophet has uttered it presumptuously. Do not stand in dread of him. So how are you going to know? He's going to predict something. He's going to predict something. Lo, the stock market shall rise. Right? If it happens, he happens to be a true prophet. If it don't happen, he's a false prophet. Right? He's going to give you a prediction, an oracle. That's a prediction. And if it happens, you know that he's true. And if it doesn't happen, it's not true. But now, you already said, but wait a minute. I mean, is that really the way you know? I mean, could be a lucky guess. Could be that he has insider information. Could be lots of reasons. Turn to page 1068. 1068. 13. Chapter 13. Chapter 13, 1068. Ready? If there appears among you a prophet or a dream diviner, and he gives you a sign or a portent, right? He makes some kind of miracle, or he tells you, this is what's going to happen. Ready? And he says, let us follow and worship another God, whom you have not experienced. Even if the sign or portent that he names comes true, do not heed the words of that prophet or dream diviner, for the Lord your God is testing you to see whether you really love God. Oh, wait a minute. A moment ago you said, if he predicts something, he speaks the name of God. Now you're telling me, if he predicts something, but his message isn't consistent with what you said before. So which is it? Is it the message of the prophet or the signs and wonders that he predicts? Which is it? This directly contradicts. Do you see that? Everybody see that? Which means what? If it directly contradicts, what does it mean? It means that the Torah is not sure. There's a debate within the community itself. Do I follow the guy who told me to follow a way that I already know? Is it the content of the prophecy? Or is it the signs and wonders that accompany the prophecy? Even within the biblical corpus itself, this question of how do you know a guy is speaking in the name of God is not entirely clear. It's a very difficult way. It's a very difficult way to determine, it's a difficult way to establish authority. Because there are a lot of people who tell you, I speak in the name of God. Right? A lot of people. Turn on television tomorrow morning. Get up early. Turn on television tomorrow morning. You'll see guy after guy who speaks in the name of God. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Which one's true? Torah says, well, it's really hard to tell. Now, there's one more problem with this. What's one more problem? As we finish this. The other problem with this is not just a model of authority. This is a model of political community. If a guy stands up and says, I speak in the name of God, and I stand up and say to him, you're wrong. What you've just told us is wrong. Or the direction you're leading us is wrong. Or the ethic you're proclaiming is wrong. Is there room for dissent? Is there room for dissent? If somebody speaks the name of God, what do you have? Absolute rule. How can you argue with that? How can you argue? You can ask a question. You can say, are you sure? But you can't question the fundamental message, because if somebody speaks the name of God, debate's over. The argument's over, right? And What does that mean? That if somebody, and if you follow Deuteronomy 18, and it's all about signs and wonders, right? Somebody says, I speak in the name of God, watch, I'll do a miracle, and you'll know that I'm God, I'm God's messenger. Then you end up with a contest of miracles, right? It's like one of these magician contests. I mean, I'll prove it to you. I saw this lady in half, right? How do you know? There's no room for dissent in this community. Now, here's the question. Is a community stronger or weaker that excludes dissent? Is a community stronger or weaker when it imposes an absolute authoritarian rule and excludes any kind of dissent? Well, I mean, just think about this for a second, right? Is it, what does it do to people? What does it do to a political community? On the one hand, to either have dissent, to encourage dissent, to encourage free exchange of opinions, to elicit conversation, political dialogue? Or what does it do to a political community, on the other hand, when you say, shut up and do what I told you, I came in the name of God? You see the problem? Korach in the Bible, if we go back to today's Torah portion, Korach challenges Moses. And the midrashic tradition, the rabbinic tradition that follows, the rabbis, the Talmud, is going to paint Korach as an evil man, as a demagogue. They're going to paint Korach as a guy who only wants power for himself, who is jealous of Moses' prerogative, who wants to take control. He's a demagogue because he speaks what the people want to hear, not what they need to hear. He's not going to raise them up. The claim is really very subtle, right? Moses, in the name of God, said to them, Kedoshim tihiyu. You will be holy. Last week, at the very end of the Torah reading, we had the section about tzitzit, right? You will do my mitzvot, vitem kedoshim. In doing mitzvot, you will grow into holiness. Moses talks about growing. What does Korach come and say? We are holy. We're born holy. We're born godly. We don't have to achieve it. It's a very subtle message. It's a very, very tempting message. It's much easier to be told, you're already just great, than saying greatness has to be achieved. You see the difference? So the Midrash plays upon that theme to make Korach into a populist demagogue, a populist who plays to the weakness of the people, the weaknesses of their temptations, the weaknesses of their hearts, and lead them to challenge Moses, who's the true leader. I want to step back from it for just a second, but there's something else going on there. First of all, there's nothing in the text that points out that Korach is inherently a bad guy. They paint him that way because they want to paint Moses as good guy, as perfect. But the real question is, can we tolerate dissent? I mean, think about what happens at the end. How does Moses defeat Korach? Does he convince him that he's right? Does he prove his authority? Does he show him that this is the true way? Does he show him that this is a better way to live your life? No. He touches the ground opens up and swallows him. That's every authoritarian leader's dream. Your political enemies disappear. Your political enemies disappear, right? They either end up in the gulag, right, or a Dachau, or they simply poof, disappear. The Russians used to put people, the Soviets used to put people in insane asylums and keep them drugged. They disappear. So there's something, in some ways, very disturbing about this. And that's why I want to get to the sheet. So take the sheet now. You can close the Torah. We're going to take the sheet. Ready? In the year 70, well, take a look at the top. This is Mishnah Pirkei Avot. Remember, the Mishnah is the great code of Jewish law, and one of the books of the Mishnah, 2nd century Palestine, 200 in Palestine, Israel. There's a section called Pirkei Avot which has no law in it and has no controversy, but is the set of sort of founding principles of Talmudic Judaism, of Rabbinic Judaism. So here's Pirkei Avot. A dispute that is for the sake of heaven will have enduring value. But a dispute that's not for the sake of heaven will have no enduring value. L'shem shemayim v'lo l'shem shemayim. There are arguments which are worth having. There are arguments which are fruitful. There are arguments which enrich us as a community. and they're arguments that destroy us as a community. And how do you know the difference? So they say, what do you mean? L'shem Shemayim, what is the sake of heaven? The arguments of Hillel and Shammai. We'll come back to that. What is an example of disputes not for the sake of heaven? The arguments of Korach and his congregation. So the rabbis are already acutely aware that what we have in this Korach is a model of political conversation. And the question is, why does it end the way it does? Why is that destructive? Let's explore this a minute. In the year 70, the Temple of Jerusalem was destroyed by the Roman Empire. Okay, the Romans got tired of governing rebellious Jews, sent the 10th Legion, they besieged the city of Jerusalem, broke through the walls, came to the Beit HaMikdash, and tore down the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple of Jerusalem. For the rabbis, this was the most devastating event in all of Jewish history. Most devastating event, because it really was the event that severed the connection between heaven and earth. The temple was the center of Jewish life. It was the place you went to come close to God. The idea that the temple is destroyed by the Roman legions means that the connection between heaven and earth has been severed, that God has been banished from the world. It's the worst thing that can happen. Centuries later, the rabbis are going to ask the question, why did it happen? Why did God let this happen? We still believe in a God, say the rabbis, who controls the facts of history. Why would God allow the Romans to do this? So they say, it happened twice, right? The first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BCE, and the second temple by the Romans in 70. The first temple, Babylonians, 586, was destroyed because of the sins of idolatry, sexual indecency, and murder. That's what the prophets told us. That's what the prophet Jeremiah specifically said, right? The second temple, in spite of the widespread study of Torah and performance of commandments and deeds of compassion during its existence, fell because of sinat chinam. Now, that's a hard thing to translate. Sinah in Hebrew means hatred. Chinam in colloquial Hebrew means something's free, without charge, right? But chinam means indiscriminate, random, boundless, unbounded. Diffuse hate. Unbounded, indiscriminate hate. Unbounded rivalry. Unbounded in the inability of a Jewish community to form solidarity. The complete loss of social cohesion. Because of sinas chinam. Boundless hatred. Sinat chinam, therefore, is a sin that weighs as heavily as idolatry, sexual indecency, and murder. And later, in other Talmud sources, and what's interesting is that these sources are substantiated and corroborated by the Roman Jewish historian Josephus, you find out that as the Romans were attacking the Jews, attacking the city of Jerusalem, the defense forces were fighting among themselves. There was no leadership. There was no authority. We couldn't get our act together to defend the city of Jerusalem. The complete loss of social cohesion, the complete loss of social solidarity, the inability of Jews to form a political community was the reason why we lost our sovereignty, lost our temple, lost our city 2,000 years ago. So now the rabbis find themselves governing the community in the wake of that catastrophe. What lesson did they learn? What lesson did they learn? You imagine that the refugees from that community come down to the town of Yavne, where the rabbis are located, and they come to the rabbis and they say, what do we do? What kind of Jewish community have we now? What have we learned from this catastrophe? And so the rabbis begin to respond. And the response begins with Pirkei Avot. And Pirkei Avot, which is these 5 chapters, there's a 6th one that's added, but 5 chapters of wise sayings, begins with a very interesting prologue, which is actually taken from a different place in the Talmud, but it's famous because it's the prologue to Pirkei Avot. And it says a very radical thing. This is number 3. The sources didn't get numbered right, so apologize. Kol Yisrael yesh lem chelek leolam haba. All Israel has a place in the world to come. Now that sounds like an arcane statement of theology, but it's not. It's a revolution in Jewish thinking. All Israel, all Jews have a place in the world to come. Meaning what? The refugees from Jerusalem came down to Yavne to meet with the rabbis, to ask the question, what do we do now? Post-Holocaust Judaism. How do we go on being Jews now after Auschwitz? How do we go on being Jews after we've watched Jerusalem burn, the priests murdered, and the temple go up in smoke? How do we go on being Jews? And the first principle the rabbis say is, Kol Yisrael yesh lem chelek leolam haba. And what's the radical word in that sentence? Kol. All. In the old times, before the destruction, you were Pharisees and you were Sadducees and you were Boithian, you were Zealots and you were Hasid. You were Democrats and you were Republicans and you were Independents and you were Libertarians. You were Likud and you were Marach and you were Meretz and you were Israel Beitenu. You were every party and every politic and every religious stripe. It don't matter no more. Before the war, you were Bundists and socialists and Marxists and communists and Hasidim and Satmar and Bells and Chabad, and you hated each other. And you know what? That's what God has destroyed, say the rabbis. Put it away. It don't matter no more. Now that there's been a destruction, put it away. Before the destruction, I could tell you, Jews like us, we're the authentic Torah, true Jews. But down Ventura Boulevard, you will find not real Jews. Better yet, on this side of Pico, we keep kosher. On that side of Pico, treif. On this side of Pico, Torah true. On that side of Pico, sinners. On this side of Pico in La Cienega, right? We're Taka Jews, real Jews, Fabrent Jews. On the other side, down by Robertson, you call them Jews. You know how you know? Look at their socks. There's a whole lecture, by the way. I'll do this one day. Jerusalem by socks. Because you can tell all of the different groups that inhabit Jerusalem by the color and shape of their socks. The Satmars, the Bells, the Chabadniks, the Turei Karta, right? The seculars, the Bundists, the communists, everyone has different colored socks. Or yarmulkes. I mean, the hats. The hat's another one. Bigger hats, right? The bigger the hat, the frummer the Jew. Oh, it's true. I'm going to get me a sombrero. I mean, ganze frumepis, I want to start wearing yellow hats. I want to be a yellow hat chassid, but the rabbis knew that this was what killed us. So what do they say? Put it away. You all have a place here. We have to find a way to make common cause. Otherwise, we're not going to be a people any longer. Call Yisrael Yeshem Chelek Le'olam Haba is the most radical thing. Put it away. It's done. It's finished. Those arguments are over now. That world doesn't exist anymore. You have a place here. Put it away. Now, but there's a problem, you see. The problem, because the Hasidim and the Misnagdim, the Bundists and the Bolsheviks, the Meretz and the Israel Beitenu, the Fox News Republicans and the MSNBC Democrats have very different views about the nature of reality and the nature of polity and the future of the country. How the hell are you going to put them together? So in order to make this work, we have to have a new idea of truth. You have to be able to, in order to make it work, that there is room for pluralism within the community, that we can create solidarity and still have diversity of opinion. Solidarity and a pluralism of opinions, we're going to have to arrive at a common idea about truth. A truth that is plural. A truth that is open. A truth with enough humility to say, here's my vision of America's future, but I'm willing to listen to yours. Because I know that I don't know everything. And that I can't be sure 100% that I'm right. That kind of cognitive humility, humility to listen to another and know that I don't know everything. That kind of pluralism of truth, but I still have my convictions. How do I have convictions and still an openness to listen to somebody whose opinions I really can't stand? How do you do that? This is what the Talmud is all about. The Talmud is a gargantuan exercise in the development of a pluralist idea of truth. That's what it is. And this is what we'll see the sources try to reflect. Look with me in these sources. Psikta de Rav Kahana is a 5th century collection of midrashim. Basically, rabbis' sermons given on high holidays between the destruction of the temple in 70 and the year more or less 400 when this was put together. So there is a remarkable collection. See, these are the rabbis of the Talmud, but not in their Talmudic guise. It's the rabbis in the Talmud when they were speaking in synagogues. And this is the rabbis, right? God appeared to the people of Israel at the Red Sea as a mighty man of war. God appeared to them at Mount Sinai as a teacher, reviewing the lessons again and again. In the days of Daniel, God appeared as an old man. In the days of Solomon, as a young man. God said to Israel, because you see me in many guises, make no mistake, it is I who was with you at the Red Sea. It is I who am with you at Mount Sinai. For we learn, Ani Adonai Elohecha, I am the Lord your God. Rabbi Chia bar Abba Rabbi Chia bar Abba summarized this teaching. God appeared to them and to us in a guise appropriate to every time and every place. That is, religious truth is relative to the circumstances in which we discover it. Sometimes you need a religious truth which is militant. And sometimes you need a religious truth which is peacemaking. And sometimes religious truth disturbs you and overcomes you. And sometimes religious truth brings you peace. Religious truth is not absolute and objective. Religious truth is relative to the circumstances of the moment. There are some very distinguished rabbis here. Each of us has very strong opinions about philosophy and theology. Each of us at funeral services for tragic people have, if not said, at least allowed things that we don't agree with because we understood that that's what that family needed at that moment. We've sometimes said, I'm not going to contradict you today because I know that you need that belief today. It may not be my belief, but it'll be a belief that'll be helpful to you. That kind of cognitive relativism is sometimes very necessary for a religious community, but it gets greater here. Look at the next idea. Rabbi Levi taught, this is the big idea, right? God appeared to the Israelites at Mount Sinai as though he were a statue with faces on every side. Anyone, you remember those strange statues? As you walk by, it looks like the eyes are following you. That's what he's talking about. Now the Hebrew in the tradition, in the original text, the Hebrew is not Hebrew. The word statue there is ikonon, which can mean icon, a statue. It can also mean mirror, right? God is a mirror. Just use that idea for it. God is a mirror, which means what? 1,000 people may look at the statue, but it would appear to each as though it were looking directly at him. In other words, revelation, religious truth, is relative to the person who's looking at it. Which means what? What I know about God is what I know about God. And I know that what I know about God is limited by my personal circumstances. If I want to know more about God, what do I need to do? I need to sit with another student and listen to them. I want to hear what you know about God. Because I can't know all of Revelation. All I know is my little bit of Revelation. If I listen to you, I will know more of Revelation. If we share our collective truths, we can create a collective intersubjective truth. A collective truth is only gained when we gather together and learn as a community. But nobody can stand up and say, I possess God's truth. I mean, that's why I love those guys on television on Sunday morning, because each one of them says, God spoke to me and said this. Can I know her a mazel tov? Right? Let me tell you something. God spoke to me and told me to keep kosher, make Shabbos, and light Hanukkah candles. Did he say that to you? I mean, I really want to do this. I mean, I fantasize. Rabbis have fantasies, right? A guy says, the Lord said, save you through. I said, great. I'm really delighted. Let me tell you what God told me to do. But you see, we can only know God if we gather together our different experiences. Revelation is relative, and therefore not one of us can claim to hold the whole capital T truth. Look at the next one. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina commented on Rabbi Levi's drasha. Right? He said, At Mount Sinai, God spoke to each person according to his or her own particular abilities. But this isn't so amazing. Says, don't be so wondered about this. Why? For when the manna came down, each person tasted it in his own way. The infants in their way, the young in their way, the old in their way. Manna was universal food, right? For babies, it was formula. For grown-ups, it was food. For elderly people, it was Metamucil, right? I mean, everybody got the nutritional value of the manna that they needed, right? In the same way that everyone, I know you're freezing, I am too, so Shechianu, V'kiyamanu, there we go. Everyone got manna, the manna they needed. Everybody got truth that they needed. But if everybody got the truth that they needed, nobody got all of it. Everyone gets the truth that they need. The only way to get really truth is to listen to your truth and you listen to my truth. And we share our truths and we see what we can find in our truths. And that's the cognitive humility. Look at the next source. Again, excuse the numbering. For 3 years, there was a dispute between the students of Shammai and the students of Hillel. Shammai and Hillel were the two great teachers of the first century. They're sort of the ones who sort of launched the rabbinic tradition. And whenever you read Talmud, it's number 5. Talmud Eruvin. Whenever you read Talmud, it's always, Amar Beis Hillel, Amar Beis Shammai, Amar Beis Hillel. This is what Beit Shammai, the house of Shammai, the school of Shammai taught, and this is what Beis Hillel taught, right? And it's always in that order, by the way. It's always Beis Shammai, Beit Hillel. Now listen carefully. It's a very subtle source. For 3 years, there was a dispute between the students of Shammai and the students of Hillel. One arguing the law is according to our view, and the other saying the law is according to our view. Hey, it sounds like Jews, right? Then a voice from heaven proclaimed, Elu ve'elu. These and these, divrei Elohim chayim, are the words of the living God. How can it be both? How can it be both? Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. Hold on that question. But the teaching of the school of Hillel will be law. The school of Hillel has precedence, right? And it was asked, the right question, right? If both are the words of the living God, why was the school of Hillel entitled to have the law according to its view? And the answer is because they were kind and humble. They studied their own rulings as well as their opponents, the school of Shammai, and mentioned the teachings of the school of Shammai before their own teachings. Now, I think that's a very powerful answer. Who has the truth? Neither one. Both of them. Both have truth. Both have truth. But we're going to abide by the teachings of Hillel. Why? Not because they own the truth or more truth, but because their procedure was more committed to the process of solidarity of the community. Because when they taught their own opinions and the other guy's opinions. And they taught the other guy's opinions with respect. Right? I mean, if you watch TV, whenever Rachel Maddow quotes Fox News, it's generally not with a lot of respect, and I could say that it's vice versa, at least in my... But if you can teach the other guy's opinion with respect, and say, nevertheless, I disagree, and here's where I disagree, and you quote the other guy's opinion first to show that you respect them. It's Beit Shammai, then Beit Hillel. In other words, because Beit Hillel had an overriding commitment to the solidarity of the community, it meant more to them to protect the solidarity of the community than it did to win the argument. They become the authoritative voice within the Jewish community. When young people get married, especially young men, one of the things I teach them is how to lose arguments. You have to know that in marriage you can't win an argument. If you win, you lose. In order to be married, you have to learn how to lose. Right? You have to learn how to say to your spouse, you might be right. Which is really hard for men to say. It's really hard for men to say. Right? I mean, men will never say, you're right. They'll say, you might be right. It's a club, but that's close enough. That works. I mean, how do you... Because I value the relationship more than I value being right. Right? Right? I'll make the turn. I'll go down 6 blocks. You'll see that it's not there. Then we'll turn around and go my way. But I'm going to say you might be right, because I value the relationship more than I need to be right. More than I need to be right, right? More than I need to be right. A surgeon doesn't do that, right? My friends who are surgeons or oncologists, they have to be right. Life and death is in their hands. But in other circumstances, and it's really hard, by the way, to do a wedding of a surgeon for that very reason. Because I have to say to the young person, kid or man or woman, I know in the OR you get to call the shot, but you don't do that at home. You got to look to your spouse. No one's going to die here if you turn right and go down 6 blocks. You'll see. It's really hard. But the idea that I'm more committed to the solidarity of the community, and I'm more committed to the procedural idea of including the other, that I'm going to quote with respect my opponent and then tell you what my view is, that means that's the procedure of Beit Hillel, which became the operating procedure of the Talmud. The Talmud is always phrased in these back and forths, in these polarities, right? So the same, look at the next source. You might ask, since the school of Shammai declared things impure, at the same time the school of Hillel declared things pure, since this one prohibits what the other one permits, how can I ever learn Torah? Bigger question, how do I ever live Torah? Like, what do you do? I mean, one rabbi on one side of Pico says one thing, and a rabbi on the other side of Pico says the exact opposite. What do? You move to the valley. That's what you do. Right? The Bible teaches Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim. The Bible teaches ve'ela hadvarim. These are the words of God. All the words have been given by a single shepherd. One God created them. One provider gave them. The Lord of all deeds, source of blessing, spoke them all. What happened? God beamed truth into the world. But when truth hit the world, it refracted. It refracted like a rainbow. Like you shine a light through a glass of water, you end up with a rainbow, right? Truth refracts so that nobody owns the whole. Nobody owns the whole. So the Talmud says, make yourself a heart of many rooms. Isn't that a beautiful phrase? Make yourself a heart of many rooms and bring into it the words of Shammai and the words of Hillel, the words of those who declare impure and the words of those who declare pure. Gather in all the opinions, because in other circumstances, you might decide to change your mind. You want to gather in all these opinions, because in other circumstances, this might be the way that you need to go. Right? And then finally, in Talmud Yerushalmi, if the Torah had been given in a fixed form, it would have been intolerable. What an idea. In other words, if there was only one Torah, if there really was only one Judaism. I have some friends who are really religiously sort of authoritarian. And they hate me because you're a conservative, you're ruining the Jewish people. I said, you really honestly think that we would be a better people if yours was the only Judaism? And the guy says, absolutely. And I say, absolutely. And 2/3 of the Jewish people would check out. Right? 2/3 of the Jewish people would check. Look, in Israel they tried that experiment, right? There's one Judaism, and 2/3 of the people don't observe it. I'm serious. I mean, if you walk into a restaurant and they hand you the menu and there's one dish, how long will you stay? If you like it, you'll eat it. If you don't, if you had it yesterday, even the Talmud says we couldn't live with that. Right? Chicken, right? What is the meaning of the phrase Vayidaber Adonai Moshe? Right? Moshe said before God, sovereign of the universe, show me the final decision on each matter of law. Moses goes to Mount Sinai and says to God, okay, I get it, all these opinions. Show me the final decision. Give me the answer. I don't want to go through the process. Give me the answer. Give me the final truth. Unteshur. Give me the bottom line. Give me the halacha, Epis. Give me the halacha. Right? If you read the Talmud, you read a long sugya. You read a long section of Talmud. This rabbi says, this rabbi says, this guy brings these quotations, this guy brings these arguments, and you go through this long thing and you get to the end and there's no end. It's like, okay, now we'll talk about something else. It's like, no! What do I do? What do I do? So there happens to be now in the Talmud a little notation system that you can see on the margin, because they you know this, right? The little notation system on the margin where they footnote the opinion that became halacha, right? It says, in the Rambam you look at this, and in Torah you look at this, and in Shulchan Aruch you look at this, and that's how you know which opinion became law. But the Talmud never tells you which opinion became law. That's not important. It's the argument that was much more important. Who cares? Well, it's kosher, right? Eat something else, So Moses says, show me the answers. God says the majority must be followed. When the majority declares the thing pure, that permitted, it's permitted. When the majority declares the thing forbidden, it's forbidden. The Torah. So God says, it's not my decision. It's your decision. The court has to decide. The human beings have to decide, not God. God doesn't decide what the truth is. The community in its conversation, in an intersubjective conversation, decides what the halacha is going to be. And therefore, there's going to be different communities. The folks on the north of Pico eat things that the people on the south of Pico don't eat. I'm not picking on Pico too much, am I? Sorry. The people in the people in Williamsburg eat things that the people in Crown Heights would never eat. Let's pick on New Yorkers, shall we? Right? The people in Skokie eat things that the people, there's all these Nicene, because each community then comes to its own set of conclusions. Why? Because Torah can be interpreted with 49 reasons for leniency and 49 reasons for stringency. There's actually a Talmudic exercise that used to be practiced in Europe, that you had to come up with 49 reasons why a sheretz is pure. A sheretz is a lizard. A lizard by the Bible is impure. But you had to come with 49 reasons why a sheretz is pure. It's a really interesting idea. Turn the page over. Now we get to some modern stuff. All right, stop for a second. What did the rabbis do? The rabbis learned from the destruction of the temple the lesson that this Torah portion raises, an answer to the question this Torah portion raises. If you set up a leadership and say, this is God's law, and anyone who disobeys it is going to be swallowed up by the earth, or anyone who disobeys has no place in the community, then you're going to destroy the community. Because you'll continue to fracture. Because then the people who think they have this side of God's law, it continues to fracture. It continues to fracture. The only way to keep the community from fracturing is adopting a stance of cognitive pluralism and humility, which is I'm willing to listen to you, and you need to listen to me, because neither one of us has the whole truth. Because all of us have a piece of the truth. Because all of us are committed to the solidarity of the community. Because the solidarity of the community is a condition for the conversation to exist. All of us are committed to the procedure, to the process. All of us are committed to a set of civic values and a set of civic virtues where we can have a passionate disagreement about any particular matter of religion or politics or community or law and still respect each other. And still walk away, shake hands, and say, listen, I disagree with you completely, but I see that you love this country. If you lose that, you have lost everything. That's why we lost the temple. We lost the temple, which means we severed the connection between heaven and earth. We banished God from the world because we couldn't disagree without being disagreeable. Because we were so sure we were right. And the other guy is just a Nazi, a capo, which is what we call each other now. Which is what we call each other now. I don't know what Israel should do about the West Bank. I would love to see a resolution of the Palestinian problem. But I know that a kid who says occupation is a poison to Israel is better than a kid who says, I couldn't give a shit about Israel. I don't care about Israel. I like kids engaged in the conversation. And when the community calls those people with Nazi words, it's destroying us. And vice versa. The person who says we can never make peace with the Palestinians because in the kishkas of their argument, of their being, of their narrative, is the destruction of the Jewish people. because they celebrate Nakba on the day we celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut. They will never respect us, and we can't give them independence because it's a mortal threat to our being. That person's not a Nazi either. This is a legitimate argument. Why can't we have the argument as loving Jews? Why can't we acknowledge that nobody has it? But when you attack each other as if you're destroyed, that's what sent God out of the world. And this is what we're doing again. If you want to see a brilliant response to this, look at David Hartman. It says number 14 here. This is from the best article he ever wrote called Auschwitz and Sinai. It's one little paragraph. And he says something. You're going to laugh when you say this, right? When you read it. The Jewish world will have to learn that the synagogue is no longer the exclusive defining framework for Jewish communal life. Stop. That's such a funny line. So you don't like a shul. You come to shul. You hear the rabbi say something you don't like. So what do? You storm out. I'm resigning my membership. I wouldn't belong to a shul with a rabbi who believes that. I'm going down the block. They're real Jews. You can do that in diaspora with synagogues. When you have a country, you can't do that. Number one, because when you adopt sovereignty, when you have a country, right, you only have one. We did this once. We had 2 Jewish countries, believe it or not. You can't do that. We have to come to some sort of an understanding with each other because there has to be a policy. You can't just storm out. The debates don't remain theoretical when you have a sovereign state. The debates have to resolve themselves into real policy, into real action. What do you tell the soldier to do? Shoot or not shoot? Shoot or not shoot? The kid needs to know. Number 2, if we keep storming out, we will not share a sufficient political solidarity to have a country. We're going to lose this country if we can't figure out a way how to disagree without destroying the context of the conversation. You can do that in a shul because you can create it. Anyone ever belong to a shul with the word emet in the title? Anshe emet, kes beit emet. Anyone? That shul was a break-off of another shul. No. The shul is Bethel, God's house. Except can't stand that rabbi. He is crazy man, lunatic, and he didn't show up to my mother's funeral. So we're leaving. We'll take a minyan and we'll go next door. We'll set up Anshe emet. People of truth. People of truth. We don't need those house of God people. And then the people of truth have their shul. And of course, they're contentious to start with because they left the shul, right? And they have a big argument, so they break off, half of them break off, with another section from Bethel, and they start a third shul called Beth Shalom. A place of peace. Because we're sick of the argument. We don't want to hear it anymore. That rabbi hasn't been here in 35 years. Stop invoking his name. Beth Shalom. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the social history of American synagogues, right? Right? That's what it, no, that's the truth. But you see, so Hartman says, but you can't do that when you have a country. Because you only have one country. And the decisions are life and death decisions. And you can't keep breaking up. We've got to find a way to have these arguments and maintain sufficient political and social solidarity, and have an ethic of civic conversation, so there can be dissent without breaking the thing apart. That's the difference between a synagogue and a state. You can't bring what you know about synagogues to Israel. You've got to recognize that this is a different creature, a different form of Jewish life, right? Moral seriousness and political maturity. These are really important words, by the way. Moral seriousness and political maturity and wisdom must come to our nation if we are to be judged by the way we struggle to integrate the Sinai covenant with the complexities of political realities. You got 40,000 Palestinians streaming across the border in Gaza. And I have a bunch of Israeli kids with machine guns and sniper's rifles. And I have to be true to both. Moral seriousness and the Sinai covenant, and political reality and realism. And we have to figure out how to do that. It can't be a synagogue where you can debate this and then go home and have kiddush and go home. I got to tell that kid, shoot or don't shoot. And I need him to know, I need that kid with the rifle to know that if he's going to get the order to shoot, it's a moral order. It's not just a politically expedient order. In Putin's Russia, you can shoot whoever you want if Putin tells you to shoot him. But in Israel, a Jewish kid with a rifle has to know that when he pulls the trigger, he's doing the right thing. Got a kid in our shul who was a sniper on the West Bank. He came back just a mess. Beautiful soul, beautiful kid. Spent a lot of time with that kid because he still had nightmares of what he did. And I had to convince him that what he did was okay. And I asked, he told me a story. I said, did you ever not take the shot? Oh, he said, all the time. I said, what happened? He said, I got the order. We got the clear. You have to get it cleared 3 times. I got the order. I got the clearance. I set up the shot. I looked through the scope, and there was a face in the window in the alley. I will not shoot a man in front of his child. Because the Jewish army doesn't do that. Really, really bad guy. Really bad guy. I will not shoot a man in front of his kid. I didn't take the shot. I said, good. That's why we have a country. That's the difference between a shul and a country. Okay? And to create that kind of personality is why you created Israel. Right? Hartman is begging you, look at what you're doing. Look at what you're doing to each other. There has to be room for dissent and debate and conversation without destroying the other. Or we're going to blow it again. We've done it twice. We're going to blow it a 3rd time. A little farther. The establishment of the modern state of Israel has removed us from the insulated world of the ghetto and exposed Judaism and the Jewish people to the judgment of the world. And not just to the judgment of the world, but to the judgment of our own children. We can no longer hide our weakness and petty failings. We live in total exposure. This is what it is. So I'm going to suggest something kind of crazy, which is the story we read in the Torah today is wrong. You don't solve debates by opening the earth and swallowing your enemies. You don't do that. That worked for Moses, because Moses was Moses. You're not Moses. I'm not Moses. Benjamin Netanyahu is not Moses. Jeremy Ben-Ami is not Moses. None of these guys are Moses. We all have a little piece of the truth. We're closer to Hillel and Shammai than to Moses. We have to develop a way to talk to each other. Moses should have left his tent, stood with Korach, and debated it. That's what he should have done. That's what he should have done. Opening the earth, that fantasy is just wrong. And it doesn't leave us. People still have that fantasy. I'll touch the earth, and all the if not now kids will get swallowed up. I'll touch the earth, and J Street will get swallowed up. I'll touch the earth, and the Likud will get swallowed up. I'll touch the earth, and Fox News will get swallowed. Come on. That's how you destroy societies. Right? Last word goes to Yehuda Amichai, the great poet laureate of the state of Israel. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful poem. From the place where we are right. I want you to bring this to your Pesach Seder next year for your uncle. You know your uncle? I know your uncle. Show it to him. He won't listen to me. Maybe he'll listen to you. From the place where we are right, flowers will never grow in the spring. The place where we are right is hard and trampled like a yard. But doubts and loves dig up the world like a mole, a plow, and a whisper will be heard in the place where the ruined house once stood. The place where we are right, no life. I think that's enough for one day. Have a good Shabbos. Have a good Shabbos.